His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family and your children and their children and their children. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family and your children and their children and their children. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family and your children and their children and their children. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family and your children and their children and their children. May His presence go before you and behind.
Welcome to the Faithful and Fearless podcast, our Catholic Girl Tea segment, where bold faith meets real talk with grace and grit. I'm your host, Kathleen,
And I'm your co-host, Sarah.
so grab your tea.
And let's get fearless.
Cheers.
Cheers. Today we're diving into something close to our hearts: religious persecution, turmoil, and migration, and the real reasons our families and so many others found themselves on their journey to Australia.
This isn't just history, this is a legacy. It's about faith that carried our parents through hardship and the hope that brought them across oceans.
Whether it was escaping war, anti-Christian hostility, or political instability, one thing remained constant: our people clung to their faith, and that faith became a compass pointing them towards safety, freedom, and the promise of a new start.
But, okay, tea time is getting very personal today. So, Sarah, let's start with you sharing your story.
Well, no one really likes diving into politics, well, except me, maybe. But to understand what had happened, we need to dive a little bit into it. My family moved from Indonesia following the 1998 riots, which began when 4 student protesters from Trisakti University were shot by the Indonesian security forces, which then triggered a massive riot in Medan, Solo, and in Jakarta, where I lived. At the time, the Indonesian president was very authoritarian. His name was Suharto. He ruled since 1967 under some New World Order. And when Suharto came into power, the Chinese descents living in Indonesia were ordered to renounce our Chinese names and change it to an Indonesian one. It was illegal to consume any Chinese media, celebrate any Chinese culture, or even speak the language. All Chinese language schools were banned, and all forms of media or anything of that were completely banned. So even though Chinese people have been living in Indonesia since the 15th century, and even though most of us are actually born in Indonesia and are technically Indonesian, we're still seen as a separate racial class. Now, most Indonesians are Muslim, but Chinese people did not practice Islam. Instead, most of us are actually Christians. There are a few of us that are Buddhist, but we are 95% Christians, either Protestants or Catholic. And the Chinese population actually only made up about 3 to 4% of the whole Indonesian population, but we also made up a huge part of the economy, and we're seen to be owning disproportionate amount of wealth and property especially during the time of economic hardship and widespread poverty and the collapse of the Indonesian rupiah. So then during that time, the Chinese people unfortunately became the scapegoat of President Suharto's corrupt regime. And because we were seen as, we were seen to be immune from the suffering of the economic downturn, we then became ostracized, and we've always been ostracized since when Indonesia was under Dutch colonial rule. And we just became an easy target because we're the minorities there.
Yeah.
The attacks were really, really deliberate. It's murder, looting, arson, bombings, rapes, you name it. So a lot of the young women and children, and they're especially targeted for sexual violence. So a lot of the young women and the children were kidnapped. They were raped publicly and then murdered as a show of like humiliation. They bombed the malls. They bombed our churches, and only because it was just easy target. They knew that we were going to be hanging out there, and it was just the easiest way to weed out the Chinese Indonesians from the other Indonesians. At that time, I was really, really young, and I remember when the tension started growing, I wasn't allowed to play outside anymore. So going to and from school, I had to be on the floor, and my maid would cover me with a blanket to hide me. And then I had to keep the curtain shut, and my mum would always say, like, don't let anyone see you from outside the house, just because if anyone were to see a young Chinese girl in there, it would have been quite bad for us. So then I also had a designated hiding area where, if anyone was to come through that weren't very good, that was where I was supposed to hide. So there was two places. One was up the top and where I had to climb, and there was one at the bottom as well. But because I was so young, I didn't really understand it. And, covering me with a blanket, I thought we were playing a little bit of a hide and seek going through to and from school,
Yeah.
And I became really desensitized from all the horrific news of like images of people getting their limbs bombed off and all of that, your gang rapes and mob violence and all of that. And I didn't actually really understand it until, funnily enough, October 7th happened in 2023, when a lot of the footages from October 7th became very much like deja vu. I've seen it all before, it looked very similar. My maid, she's like a mother figure to me, and she would always recollect how scary it was during the time, because my mum had multiple businesses and investment properties. She had to be the one hiring. We had to hire people to sort of like pose outside the houses. And if a mob comes up and say, who owns this house, she'd be like, oh no, someone Muslim, or this guy, or someone Buddhist, or any of that. And then she also recollected one of the mobsters coming by, and they were holding machetes, and they were ready. We also had to be really, really careful with who we associated with and who we could trust, and that went on for quite a while. Not even our dogs were safe if we left them outside. Dogs are seen as sort of like a wealth symbol in Indonesia. So if you had a dog, you were seen as wealthy, and a majority of the wealthy people were the Chinese Christians. So they would just kill the dogs and all of that. So we had to get our dogs inside. It was just a very, very scary time. And then the military forces didn't even intervene in any of this either. They would just stand by and allow sort of the chaos to escalate. And so the 98 riots, that wasn't the first time the ethno-religious discrimination happened. But whenever there is political instability and economic downfall and all of that, it's frequently stoked, the anti-Christian sentiments. And even though the legal discrimination has been repealed, so a lot of the Chinese people were allowed to take on their Chinese names again and, consume media and all of that, there's still quite a bit of anti-Chinese sentiments, even to this day. And even though it ended in 1999 or 98, the riots didn't actually stop, and the gang rapes and all of that didn't stop until well into 2002. So it went on for quite a while.
Yeah. When you were talking, I remembered, so I went to college around that time, and most of my friends were all Indonesian, Indonesian or Malay Indonesian, and but most of them were Muslims and I think Hindu. So I heard all those stories, but from their perspective. So hearing you talk about it, such a different story.
Yeah, right.
But also brings back those memories of when I was, in college, listening to all these stories from all of them. But, listening to you also makes me wonder, how trauma sneaks in as we grow up. Because you were saying,
definitely,
now you're a dog groomer. So I wonder how that affected you, because you were talking about dogs and then also think about dog groomer. Somewhere as you grew up, there must have been some connection to.
Yeah. I mean, I've always loved dogs, so we've always had dogs. But during that time, it was like, well, should we just rehome her? Like, it was. Even though I knew she could handle herself, she's quite a biter, that one. But if there was a mob, then she'd definitely die.
But you never know, subconsciously, maybe you're like, I want to be a dog groomer so I can protect these dogs and look after these dogs, because
Well, yeah, that's probably why I wanted to be a vet first, and then I realized I didn't like being a vet.
But yeah, no, it definitely truly hits home for me. My story's similar, but a little bit with a bit of a twist, slightly different as well. I remember I just turned 9 actually, and my family migrated to Australia. They'd made that life-changing decision to come months prior. We were caught in a world where going to church or riding our bikes or even like going out for dinner just became a matter of life and death. And it was all religious based. My parents came here on an independent skilled visa. They were both very highly qualified professionals doing well in their career. So I guess, part of them probably didn't want to leave. But they didn't need to come here for financial reasons. No one helped them, and they came here for my sister and my safety, for peace, to give us a better future that didn't feel like always a gamble every day.
Yeah.
Over time, our home stopped feeling like a home. The religious persecution really had crept in every day. I remember how hard it became, just to go to school, going to church. My parents still went to church, but it became such a huge risk There was always fear in the streets, and it kind of never really left you. One of the moments that I'll never actually ever forget was when I was sick. I was quite a sick child, but there was this one weekend that I actually one day for going to school, I was sick during the week, and normally my mum's brother, he would take us to the park with our bikes. But that day, my sister and I stayed home because I was sick, and some gunmen opened fire in the park, killing many of the mums and kids that day. And I remember mum telling us how my uncle, he rushed home and he like panicking and thinking, you know, we had gone and something had happened to us.
Could you hear the gunshots from your house?
Probably. I don't really remember.
Yeah.
I was sick, but also I was quite young. So I do feel like a lot of the trauma parts of it was suppressed, but I do remember parts of it. You know, but when he did see us at home asleep, he was so relieved. But like he was just so Paddington. My mum was like, "What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?" He just wanted to make sure that my sister and I were okay.
Yeah.
And I truly believe like God saved us that day. But not much longer after that, I was kind of a daddy's girl, and I always loved going on his motorbike. And one night, my dad, he wanted to go and get us some dinner, so I went with him. And out of nowhere, these guys in a convertible pulled up and started shooting people on the street. And I remember my dad grabbed me and we hid in this corner in a house, excuse me, until it was over. And that was actually really traumatic. I remember trying to grab my shoes and I was like shouting, "Dad, my shoes, my shoes." And he's like, "The shoes, forget the shoes." And he just lifted me and we hid in that corner. And, you know, I do feel that was another protection. Obviously, God knew he had plans for my family and for us, you know, to prosper, grow, have a future. And honestly, I know it's a bit of a joke, but I think that's probably why I have a bit of an obsession with my shoes. You know, I've got hundreds of shoes. And maybe that trauma /
from losing your shoe.
Was, you know, trauma with the side of fashion was maybe something that developed as I grew older. I think only in my 20s or 30s I realized maybe that was something that was through trauma, why I love shoes so much. I don't know.
Yeah.
Jokes aside, those experiences really became part of the reason, you know, why we had to leave. You know, and trauma really shouldn't be part of a childhood memory, but it is for a lot of people. And, you know, I'm so glad my parents made that sacrifice for my sister and myself. And we could grow up somewhere safe, somewhere where we have amazing healthcare, education. But what really stands out for me is as a woman, I can dress as freely as I like. I have a voice, you know, I can be respected and I didn't have to cover up at every opportunity or be in fear all the time. But a few years later, we returned on vacation because my parents really missed their family that couldn't come to Australia. And I remember the moment we stepped off that plane, it's just a different world. And I was, I think, about 12. And this is my personal experience was, you know, I was met with nothing but harassment and fear because now I was starting to become a grown woman. And, you know, I remember while waiting for our lift at the airport, this man just sort of stood about a meter away from me, standing and staring, and just felt uncomfortable, harassing, not normal. And he just kept looking at me up and down. And, I'm just a 12-year-old girl. And at that time, I was a real firecracker. I think I am still sometimes now, but I'm much more chilled. And I'm telling my dad, this man just won't stop staring at me, looking at me up and down. And he was just like, ignore him. I know that, my dad didn't want any trouble. So he said, okay, let's move to the other side. And, in the airport, they have the seats that are back to back. So we just went to the other side. And he just followed and stood in front of me again and just kept staring at me. And, I just feel like in that country, women are so sexualized and exploited and treated like they have no worth. I just didn't like it. But once we got into
even as a 12-year-old, like that kind of staring was like not normal,
because I was used to being free and wearing shorts and a t-shirt and not having men look at you and stare at you, or having to cover up and all. You just you instinctively know it's just not normal.
Yeah, you do.
But once we got into transport, it got worse. The unease persisted everywhere I looked, until we got to my grandmother's house. There were massive armed trucks like every few meters with these soldiers standing with massive rifles. It was just nonstop. And for being young, and just all I remember is Australia, most of Australia, you don't have those terrifying pictures just looking outside your house or going from place to place. And I really felt deeply uncomfortable. And I remember begging my parents every single day, please, I just want to go back home. And we couldn't go back. We were on a holiday, and my parents wanted to spend time with their parents and their siblings. And, what's even worse is we couldn't dress as we did in Australia. No shorts, no T-shirts. We had to completely be covered up, because my mum said if we didn't, we had the risk of having acid thrown on us, which is what they did to women in that country. So I remember one day my mum and her sister-in-law, I don't know how they managed to convince me, but they convinced my sister and I, let's go to the shops. And the four of us were linked in arms, walking together. And this man approached my sister and grabbed her in her chest. And she was 13, and my sister was quite developed from age of 10. And I was gobsmacked. I was shocked. And not just that, I was irate. And I wanted to go after this man and go, what are you doing? But my mum and my aunt just said, nope, just keep going. Don't look back. Don't say anything. Keep going. And it's hard when you're a child not to say something.
Definitely, yeah.
I just remember the whole, I think it was like 4 weeks, something like that. I just begged my parents. I didn't leave after that. I didn't leave my grandmother's house. I stayed there. But I just begged them every day, and I was sick, vomiting literally every day. I just didn't feel safe. I felt really traumatized. And that was the last time I ever went back. But, I thank my parents for their courage and their strength and the love it took to start over again, especially because they grew up in a place that they loved, that was happy, that was safe. It just got worse probably when, my sister and I were children. So for them, it was, really hard as well. But I definitely, thank God for blessing us with the freedom we have here every single day, and for, bringing us here, because I still have some family who haven't been blessed with that opportunity to come to Australia and had to go through probably a lot more. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so you've never been back ever since?
No, and
Yeah, I
I
mean,
never
yeah,
go back.
yeah.
And
I
there's
think,
no reason to go back because you have everything you could ever want in Australia.
yeah, that's true.
Apart from the food and the great shopping, that was probably the only thing I would say you could miss. But you
Yeah,
can get better, and people don't realize how blessed, I would say the real Aussies, they wouldn't really understand how blessed they are and how lucky they are.
I find a lot of the older generations tend to understand it a lot better. The ones that are sort of like my age and a little bit above, they really do take it for granted, and yeah, they really don't understand how bad it can be
Yeah.
elsewhere. Um, and it's scary to think about it now that some Australians want socialism,
Yeah.
and they think that all cultures are equal. They're not. So,
Mm.
some cultures are definitely morally better.
Mm.
And it's just wild to think about it, that like their our parents' yes to migration was really a yes to keeping the faith alive for us, because like you said, you guys still went to church, but because they were bombing our churches, we just did not go at all. It just, it wasn't, yeah, it just
I
wasn't
mean,
safe.
it got worse. Obviously, after we left, that
Yeah,
they obviously picked, Catholic churches because you can
yes,
tell, because that country was a Muslim country. Um, so yeah, I really think about it now. Like, I don't know what I would do without. I drive on my own from place to place, go to church. Over there,
hmm
I wouldn't be able to drive. I wouldn't really have a voice. Wouldn't have yeah, anything. And thinking about today where we are, and now we have a podcast. Talking about Jesus, and it kind of feels like a real full circle moment. You know.
yeah,
So
definitely.
life would have been very, very different if my parents never chose to come to Australia. Maybe we might not have even been here today. So
Yeah, well, we wouldn't have met, would we?
no. So why do you think your family chose Australia, Sarah?
Um, honestly, it was just seen as a safe haven. Not only was it the closest one to Jakarta, especially Perth. Perth is the closest one from Jakarta in the whole of Australia. Some of my family actually migrated to the US, but I just think about that flight and it's awful.
Yeah.
And obviously the West does offer religious freedom, and there's already Catholic communities here. We know friends here that have moved as well, because obviously with the 98 riots, a lot of people migrated, especially here around the same time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and just the possibility of keeping our faith and culture intact.
And also, I guess let's not forget the church in Australia, has been shaped by a lot of migrants like Italians, Lebanese, Filipino, Vietnamese. And so many of them have brought their flavor of faith here as well. A truly universal church. So Yeah.
Yeah, and what's really beautiful in our parish is that we have a rosary walk every now and again, and you know, one decade would be said in English, and then another decade would be said in Indonesian, and then another decade would be in I think Hindi.
Yep.
And then another decade would be in another language. And it's so beautiful to like have all those different languages
Yeah.
come together, say the same prayer, you know? And
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, so from like persecution to parish potlucks. And that's the Catholic migrant journey in a nutshell.
Amen. May we never forget the sacrifices that our family made. That's really our foundation. Yeah.
Or if you're listening and your family has a migration story, sit down with your grandparents, ask questions, and learn why. The stories are always gold.
I'm one of those people. I love nostalgic. I'll probably say is that I love sitting and just hearing all the stories from my parents' time, grandparents' time that they tell us, and so yeah,
Definitely, just the history of your
yeah,
family as well, right?
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so if you're walking through a time of pressure or feeling like your faith makes you different, remember you're not standing alone. In those footsteps of fearless believers, um, you know, you're definitely not alone.
As always, thank you for sipping the tea with us. Let's close with some truth from Scripture. Matthew 5:10 says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven."
Well, until next time of Catholic Girl Tea, where we keep it real, reverent, and richly rooted in Christ, take care and God bless.
If you just know you're that girl,
Yeah.
you just have no choice but to be that girl. And I feel like I'm that girl.
What if you don't wake up feeling like that girl? How do you be that girl?
You need to go back to sleep and wake back up again so you can feel like that girl.